Hi guys, a quick disclaimer before we start today's show. We're going to talk today about the worlds of wellness and mental health, but it's worth mentioning that this podcast shouldn't be used in place of the support and care of an appropriately qualified health professional. On with the show.
Welcome to A Spoonful of Theory, a monthly podcast looking at the facts, theories and stories from the world of wellness and mental health. Each month Ben and I will be joined by a guest who has the same passion and interest in all things mental health related to present their fact from the past, present and future. Today I'm sat here with Ben.
Hello.
And we're joined by a hypnotherapist at the Cotswold practice and author of Good Grief, a companion to change and loss, Dipti Tait.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi Dipti.
Hello.
So, we'll crack on with the facts, and the first fact is mine.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, so my fact this month is that the left-hand side of your brain and the right-hand side of your brain are different colours.
Different shades of pink? What colours are they?
Well, I mean, it's super, super exciting. They are grey and a different shade of grey.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not far off him.
Yeah. It's not even the full 50, it's just two shades of grey.
I like how your mind went there straight away, Dipti.
I just heard the word shades and words grey.
The pre-watershed version.
Nice.
Yeah, just two shades. So in of itself, that might not sound that interesting, but the reason that this is interesting, we are probably all aware here that when you see pictures of the brain and that sort of wrinkly shape, that wrinkly grey matter, that's the outside of your brain, that's the sort of higher intellectual part, and it's made up of neurons. Mm-hmm. And the left-hand side of the brain is made up of closer packed together neurons, and the right-hand side brain, they're further apart with longer connections. And what that means is that the left-hand side of your brain, it's darker because it's got more closely packed dark neurons, and they process information in this quite densely packed, quite intense kind of way. It'll work with sort of high levels of data and really process things.
Right.
And then the right hand side of the brain, it's also got processing centres, but they're further apart. And the reason it's a lighter shade of grey is because the parts that join that together are sort of insulated sheath that is white.
Ah, right.
And so what that means is that it works monitoring broader relationships between clusters.
Right.
And that's why the two sides of our brain, the left-hand side and the right-hand side of our brain, work in different ways. One is very much about the detail and ferreting out detail, but it can get a bit obsessed and end up at quite a funny conclusion, whereas the right-hand, that's the left-hand side, and the right-hand side of the brain kind of is monitoring that things make sense. Okay. And I just thought this was really interesting because we kind of know people talk about left-hand side, right-hand side of the brain, but to find out that actually it's structurally built differently to the point that if you looked at it just with your bare eyes, that's not correct.
I don't have bare eyes.
Naked eyes.
We're back to 50 Shades of Grey.
I know, it's all gone wrong. But you could tell by just looking at it that they are different.
So when people talk about the logical side of the brain and the kind of creative side of the brain, that's kind of accurate then?
Yeah, the right-hand side, which is more associated with being creative, it sort of monitors the broader relationships. And so it can identify problems and have sort of insight. It has kind of aha moments. And it also keeps the left-hand side in check, that the left might go so down the rabbit hole that up is down and down is up. Yeah. And the right-hand side of the brain will go, actually, what do we know about the world? That's just not right.
Yeah. I watched a TED talk a few years ago, and it was a neuroscientist who actually worked at NASA. Her name's Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor.
All right.
And basically, she was a neuroscientist. Well, she still is a neuroscientist, but her TED talk was describing her own stroke.
Right.
And then she wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. And the stroke was pressing on her left hemisphere of her brain. Yeah. So she was losing the left side of the abilities of the left, which was what she was describing, logic, reasoning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what it meant was her right side was expanding. So, I mean, you just got to watch the video, because the way she describes having her stroke was incredible, because she's losing all of the practical aspects of, oh my goodness, maybe I need to call a doctor. But then her creative brain was opening up, and she was going into kind of curiosity and imagination and wow and wonder. And she was like, wow, I'm having a stroke from the inside out. Wow, this is amazing. And she was losing all of her ability to say, yeah, you know what, hang on a minute, this is kind of serious. You've got to be able to get this sorted, get some help.
Yeah.
And we need both sides to be working, properly and together.
No, it's a good point, and I have read as well that if you were to switch off the right hand side of your brain, nobody would notice for a long time. Well, I mean, at least hours or something like that. Whereas if you switched off the left hand side of your brain straight away, you'd look like you didn't really know what you were doing, or you wouldn't communicate very effectively. Yeah. So they are both important. They both can actually do aspects of the same thing, but just in different ways. But yeah, so that must be interesting to lose the part that's the more immediate, the more obvious.
And obviously how they know these things as well. The reason a lot of us know why these parts of the brain do these specific things is through brain injuries, through strokes, through being able to study these things and see how it affects people. I watched, I think it's David Siegelman, is that the brain scientist? He had a documentary, I think it was called The Brain, and in one of those episodes he talked to somebody who'd had the hippocampus removed to remove epilepsy when he was a child. But from that point he had no memory, so his kind of immediate memory was gone. It was
because that's what the hippocampus does,
so he didn't even know really. So you talked to him and he said, I think somebody told me once maybe that I had an operation once. Like he couldn't even see the things that had happened to himself. So he lived in a kind of constant bubble of the present almost.
Oh wow.
Which is, interesting. Yes, super interesting. But again, it's one of those things where you need those things. You need a little bit of the past to teach you where you've been. You need a little bit of the future to head towards. Yeah, exactly. So I found this really interesting, and I was looking at colours of the brain. There's another bit of the brain that's coloured as well, possibly not in such an interesting way, but it's called well, I'm gonna have to read it because I always say Sierra Negra, but that's actually a burger at our local burger joint.
I thought that's a range of mountains.
It is. It's also a volcano in the Galapagos. But it's actually called Substantia nigra, which is Latin for black coloured. I know, it's not even close to it, is it? But this is basically due to that the high levels of neuromelanin, which is melanin in the brain, neuromelanin, and that's dopaminergic neurons. So essentially, this is the onset of Parkinson's, and people don't usually notice the onset of Parkinson's or until it's about 80% depleted, I believe.
So when you said a word there that I thought it was myelin.
Melanin. Neuromelanin.
Oh no, it is melanin. Sorry, I thought you were just pronouncing something differently from me. no, I was wondering if I was saying it wrong because that's the sheath, that's the white part.
Oh, myelin sheathing.
The myelin sheath, and I thought that was something to do with Parkinson's. That's why I thought, oh, really? Maybe I'm saying it wrong.
So myelin sheathing is really interesting because it's the thing that children have. So children have myelin sheathing on around the brain, and it lets them be 100 times faster sending signals. Kind of like when you have
they're super insulated. Because the
super insulated. Yeah, just like a kind of copper wire with insulation.
It's like a neural net.
Exactly, and that's why children learn so quickly because they have this myelin sheathing. But you lose it as you get older. I think it's about 8 that you start to lose that, and that's why sometimes you see a kind of children doing really, really well. They get to about 8, and then they kind of get frustrated at themselves because they're unable to learn new things quite as quickly as they had before.
Oh, I have a 7.5-year-old. I better tell her she's got 6 months. Let's be
clear. We all develop at different rates. I cannot say it's not your 8th birthday. You're 8, you become a witch, and you've lost the ability to learn. No, you've not got any of that.
Yeah, when you're 9, your myelin sheath has just disappeared.
You will never learn again. Has anybody got anything more to say on colours of the brain?
I was thinking you were going to say they were actually like rainbow colours, so I was thinking, yay, and now I'm a bit like disappointed to know they're just two shades of grey.
It's 2 shades of grey, and maybe a bit that's a bit black.
Dipti, I think your brain has rainbow colours in it. I think
I'm sure
we'll allow
that.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think we need to do a study on my brain, and you'll see it's like unicorn dust going on there.
Definitely leave it to science. I'm going to move on to my fact, if that's all right. Yeah, so my fact is that you're not going to keep that New Year's resolution, but you already kind of knew that. And this is a survey from a guy called Richard Wiseman, who wrote a book called 59 Seconds. I would hold that book up, but I got gypped for it last time, so I'm not going to hold the book up. But I will put it on Instagram when we put this podcast out. And it's also mentioned in another of his books called Quirkology, which is online as well. And this is a study of 3,000 people looking at why people fail and, more importantly, what they can do to succeed. So he says, throughout 2007, we tracked over 3,000 people attempting to achieve a range of resolutions, including losing weight, visiting the gym, quitting smoking, and drinking less. At the start of the study, 52% of the participants were confident of success. 1 year later, only 12% had actually achieved their goal. And that kind of sounds about right, doesn't it? for New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
He divides them, obviously, because he's got all this data, and I'd say this isn't a scientific experiment as such, but it is an interesting study. He says that men are 22% more likely to succeed when they set intermediary goals or focus on rewards. A reward being, for example, being more attractive to the opposite sex. Which is
that's a good goal.
It's an intermediate reward. Women are 10% more likely to succeed if they tell people their goals.
Yes.
Yeah, and he says that's because... So he says men may be more likely to adopt a macho attitude and have unrealistic expectations, and so a simple goal setting helps them achieve more. And likewise, women may be more reluctant to tell others about their resolutions, and so benefit from a more social support provided by friends and family once they've made their goals public.
That really, really is interesting, because I am doing a challenge at the moment, and it's a 365-day no shopping challenge.
Wow.
And I didn't want to ever confess this or admit this out loud, being a hypnotherapist, but I realised I had a shopping addiction. And on the 8th of November, so just gone, I realised that actually I got this addiction from my mother, even though she's no longer with us anymore. And then it was her birthday on the 8th of November, so I thought, well, to honour her birthday, I'm going to set myself this yearly challenge to stop shopping at all for a whole year. And I put it out on Twitter because I felt I needed to tell everybody. So that's exactly what I did. And then our local radio station picked up on it, and they said, great, can we follow you for the year? And I was like, oh my goodness, I've really got to do it now. But now it's been a month and I've done 1 month, so I've only got 11 months to go. But it shows that I did need that sort of social validity or that social approval, and to kind of have that accountability kind of proves that theory.
And I suppose it is a tiny bit of pressure that motivates you, I suppose. But also admitting it to yourself out loud. Because quite often we have these little thoughts and we run through them and say, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. Oh, I will. But then we kind of don't follow them through because, well, we haven't really admitted it out loud. He talks about other ways to succeed as well. He says, make only one resolution rather than trying to do lots of things at once. Concentrate on one thing at once.
I think that is a classic thing when you're trying to improve your life. You think, I'm going to just, while I'm on it, I'm just going to sort out everything. Everything. Everything's going to get fixed now.
Which is weird because actually I believe that if you do sort one thing out, other things will improve.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But if you try and do lots... Sorry, go on.
They probably sequentially follow, don't they? It's not like you do it all at
That's
once.
Right, totally. And in fact, actually, because if you do all of them at once, if you say, like, I want to get healthier, lose weight, and stop drinking, those three things you're probably not going to achieve. But if you stop drinking, you probably lose weight and be healthier.
Well, that's true, but also I think some of the reasons for why you might be drinking or drinking too much are probably when you start to see them for what they are, you start to see why you're overeating. Because obviously eating is fine, but overeating is not fine. And it's the same with various other things. When you see the sort of inherent emptiness of the negative habit that you've got, I think it does start to flow into other areas. If that's how you see it, if you just kind of, iron willpower, I will not drink.
Are you...
Was that your caveman?
I thought it was an aristocrat. I thought you were an aristocrat. You had a big top hat on.
Oh, really? I don't even know what I was doing. Maybe I'm being one of the macho men. No, I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to... But when you're kind of doing that... Well, no, that was what your chap was saying. I'm just referencing the material.
Okay.
Anyway, I think when you're trying to do it like that and it's just pushing with willpower, then it's really hard to keep that up. And also it's one thing, whereas I think sometimes when you start to come out, what am I getting from this? I'm not getting anything from this. And then you start to see that, you make the changes, and then the other stuff comes about. When you make healthy, sustainable change, then it does flow out into the other stuff. And I think you're right, if you do one healthy behaviour, chances are it's going to benefit you in other ways. It's going to make you feel good.
I mean, at the very minimum, if you do one healthy behaviour, you can see that you can do it, and you trust in yourself to be able to change one thing. And that means you can change something else next time. So the other ways that he says, plan ahead. So this will be going out in January. So some of you will have already started New Year's resolutions. But if it's New Year's Eve and you decide to start it on the 1st of January and you just go, I'm just going to do this, that's probably not a good idea. What you want to do is plan for it. Well, if we're talking about alcohol, I feel sorry for people that are quitting alcohol. But because it's great. No.
Especially over Christmas and New Year.
Yeah, but I don't mean that. What I mean is you need to get the alcohol out of your house, really. Otherwise, you're going to be tempted all the time. Do you know what I mean? So you plan a little bit further ahead. If you're going to start running, it's worth having a think about how you actually start running.
You have to have a strategy, I guess.
That's it. Exactly. Strategy. Perfect.
But also, again, this is what you were saying, Jeni. It's about the value of why am I doing this? Why is this important to me?
Yeah.
And it could be a personal value, it could be a global value, whatever. Like I went vegetarian because I watched a documentary with my kids, and they went vegetarian, and then they said, can you just watch this documentary with us? And so then I watched it, and then suddenly there was something that hit my value system.
Yeah.
And because now every time I think, like I went to the Christmas market yesterday in Bristol and I could smell the German sausages, and I thought, well, no one's here, I could just have one. Immediately I saw the kind of image that I saw in the documentary. I won't go on about it because I don't want to be one of those Bible bashy vegetarians, but that came into my brain, and that totally overrode my desire for the German sausage.
We're back to 50 Shades of Grey. So another thing he says is make it personal. So it says exactly what you're saying, make it personal.
But I think that there is something as well to that. Yeah, they're seeing the negative side of the German sausage. But there's also the kind of... I became vegan a number of years ago, and I still remember the first meal that I made myself as a vegan, and it was muesli with soya milk. It doesn't sound very exciting.
That's not a meal, that's breakfast.
Well, I was a student, so it probably was a meal.
Fair enough. To be fair, I eat breakfast for tea all the time. So.
Yeah, and I remember very much, even now, this is years and years later, I remember that feeling of nothing was harmed in this meal. I didn't think about, there's no milk in it. Oh, aren't I being a good person? There's no milk in it.
Yeah.
Or I didn't think about all the things I was depriving myself. And it was funny because at that point when I made the decision, something kind of switched in my brain, and it was just, I felt good and happy to do that.
Yeah. And
I didn't feel deprived at all.
Yeah.
You're just happy
you
with
see
your
what you're
choices.
gaining instead.
I think that's a lot easier to do.
Well, that's another one of it. So he goes through and we've got make only one resolution, plan ahead, avoid previous resolutions, i.e. choose something new or a new approach to it. It's like, if you want to go running, maybe don't go to the gym, maybe just run around your house, but outside. Be specific, make it personal. But one of these things is carrot, not stick. So for men specifically, smart goals, like time manageable, small achievable goals, but also carrot, not stick. So don't beat yourself up about it. Look for the reasons you're doing it. To make you more attractive to the opposite sex, or the health benefits, rather than saying this will make me be able to play out with my kids in the summer, or this will, the things that really get to us, the things that you kind of touch your chest and go, that's nice, and those are the things that keep you going. Watching that thing with your kids, when you talk about it, you didn't talk about the really negative aspects of it, you talked about sitting down with your kids, and that's the interesting bit about it. So you've got that reasoning, and it doesn't have to be negative, like you say. It can be solution focused, which is where we all.
I mean, you're looking for the whys rather than why nots.
That's it, yeah. And I think the more that you do that, it's a skill. I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then
you get a bigger dopamine reward, I think, from saying no.
Yeah.
Because you've kind of overridden that other part that wants you to do it. So you've not only got the dopamine reward from not doing it at all, but you've also got the dopamine reward for overriding the other bits. So it's like a double dose.
And if you tell your friends and they think you've done really well, they'll give you a hug and you'll get some oxytocin.
Yeah.
So we're getting happy come somewhere. That's good. Should we get on to the next fact?
Mm-hmm.
And the next fact is Dipti's fact. Yeah, go for it.
So basically, I've been reading a book called The Discomfort Zone, and I am really, really interested in this idea. And it's basically about how can we find comfort within discomfort. And when we can find comfort within discomfort, that makes us stronger human beings.
Wow. So
that was what I'd like to talk about.
Yeah, go for it. So that's really interesting. We talked about it a little bit the other day, didn't we? And you had that a quote from somebody that you'd met that I really liked.
Well, actually, it was one of my clients, which was a really interesting thing that she said. We were just in a normal hypnotherapy session, and we were talking about discomfort. And then she just came up with this little quote, and she said, "I'd rather be lost in life than stuck in life." And I thought that was a really interesting, snippet, because quite often none of us really look forward to being lost. But actually, if we kind of break it down, if you're lost, it means you can kind of find your way because you've got an option to. So it kind of helps you develop resources and look for skills perhaps that you didn't know you had. Or whatever. If you're stuck, you do feel that you are literally shut down, and it doesn't feel as creative, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's what she was talking about. She said she'd rather feel lost than stuck. Both of those ideas are still uncomfortable, but I guess there's a better feeling of comfort in one of the feelings of discomfort, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what do you think you've learned from this then, from this concept?
Quite often, a lot of the time when we see people, we see them because they are trying to find some level of homeostasis or balance or feeling of positivity, because they don't really want to be where they are. So they are absolutely uncomfortable in their life or in their circumstances or in their relationships or even with their own relationships with themselves.
Yeah.
So once we understand that discomfort isn't the enemy, I guess, and actually we can find some kind of strength within it. And we could talk about the lobster guy as well, because I think he's really, really significant. And that's one of the metaphors I use for my clients who talk about being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'll come on to the lobster guy.
I'm
once
intrigued.
We can find comfort. You're wondering what the lobster guy is.
Yeah, I really am.
I know what the lobster guy is, but I still like him.
The comfort zone is something that we're always looking to stay in because that feels easy, it feels doable, But once we step out of the comfort zone, oh my goodness, what is there? What is there for us? Is there anything to support us? Are we going to be in danger? So therefore our amygdala could possibly be going really crazy here because we don't really know our safety zone at all. We've come out of it. So that doesn't feel so good. So actually, when we can learn to extend our discomfort zone, and that helps you increase your comfort zone, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, it's kind of, you have to, you have to kind of push those boundaries. I mean, that discomfort is a motivator, essentially.
Yeah.
In Buddhism, they have this wheel of life, this idea that you can be born into different realms.
I honestly thought there was a Buddhist wheel of fortune then, and I was like, this would be the best program
this
ever.
Would be good. Yeah.
Imagine the Buddhist wheel of fortune on there.
Well, it's,
sorry.
Yet again, it's not as interesting as that.
Sorry.
No. But there's this idea of these 6 realms, and one of them is the God realm. And this is a really, really nice place to be in terms of comfort and pleasure. All the pleasures that you would find in the human world are there in the God world, and you don't have to work, and it's really nice. But from a Buddhist point of view, it's actually not a very good place to be, because you can't become enlightened. You can't get free of the wheel of birth and death and rebirth.
Yeah.
The best place to be is in the human realm, where there is discomfort. But part of the reason why being in the God realm is not useful is because with all this comfort and with all this pleasure, becomes attachment. So if you're very attached to something, you really, really don't want to lose it. So I do wonder if actually, ultimately, you can't sustain that comfort anyway, because you would get so worried about that thing is really important. Yeah, becoming very attached to it. And then, but also, it's inherent stuckness, isn't it? Because you're like, I don't want to do anything else. I'm just going to stay here.
From an anxiety perspective, from my own anxieties and from seeing clients as well, there is this. You're looking out for threats, so you try and minimise those. And one of the ways you do that is in your kind of bedroom. Your four walls and the cover over your head. That's a safe place. That's that comfort, isn't it? That's that.
Yeah.
And the more you're there, the more you don't want to leave that. The more and the harder it gets to kind of actually build resilience to see these. Yeah. And that's what it is, really, isn't it? That extending that comfort zone is actually a resilience skill. One of the language patterns that I use, but also something that I find really interesting is if you don't get out of that, then there's people that you won't meet. If you don't get out of that kind of anxiety bubble, there's places that you won't go to. And these are people and places that will play important parts in your life. And so it's important to start doing these things, because you can't, get a support network without meeting people. And
we need to change. We need to change, don't we? Because we are built this way with all these sort of positive neurotransmitters like the dopamine and this kind of thing. Yeah. You only get them by moving forward, by progressing.
100%.
So I need to tell you about the lobster, though.
Oh, yes, the lobster guy, yeah.
I've been waiting.
So basically, do you know how a lobster grows, Jeni?
No. Would be the answer.
So basically, the lobster has a shell, which is a tough, hard exterior, which we know about, and inside it's got its kind of squishy middle. And now, when the lobster kind of needs to get bigger, what happens is the shell stays as hard as it is, and the squishy middle bit grows inside the shell. So eventually, the poor lobster inside the shell is absolutely squished, and it feels really, really uncomfortable, and it's claustrophobic, and it's just not having a very nice time in there. It's kind of like stuffing yourself into an EasyJet seat, one of those types of scenarios. So it learns at that point that it's got to go and find somewhere to kind of hide, because eventually its shell is going to crack off and crack open. So that level of discomfort means that the lobster kind of goes under a rock, and then eventually the shell cracks off, and then it grows another exterior, another shell. So that's how the lobster grows. So basically, I use that metaphor. So when one of my clients are feeling, stifled or stuck or, kind of too claustrophobic, and they need to kind of express themselves a bit more, that's the time where they need to kind of recognize this level of claustrophobia is because they need to grow. They are developing at some level, and there's a change that needs to be made. Yeah. So let's all be like lobsters.
Yeah, lobsters are really interesting. They're kind of immortal. Like they basically they just keep growing. And they'll quite often they'll pass away through being eaten or something happening to them, external factors. But actually, if you just left them, they get really, really old out in this and really, really big.
That's a kind of good thing that they get eaten. Otherwise, we'll just be full of I don't know. Can you imagine the rampage of the giant lobster?
Next year, they're there. No, I'm conspiracy theory. They are there. Giant lobsters are there.
That's the next thing that's going to happen.
The rampage of giant lobsters.
Cockroach doesn't die either. They're bomb-proof, aren't they?
So cockroaches and lobsters. But the interesting thing about that is that, so for me, that the idea that they kind of immortal means that, look, they're constantly having to feel this. They're constantly going through these periods of discomfort and then growing because of it. And that's why I like that metaphor, because I think it's not just one. A client comes in maybe and they want to deal with one thing at a time, and that's totally understandable and a good thing that they're getting that help. But actually, like you say, it's getting out of that comfort zone. Building that resilience means that you can have more uncomfortable times, but also learn so much more and keep learning. And that's a skill, I think,
Yeah, and I like the metaphor a lot, because also this idea about that's going to feel quite vulnerable when that shell cracks. When you do it, when you kind of go, right, I have to bust out of this thing. But that idea of making that safe place to bust that open, because there's going to be that period of making the new shell, making the new way of going. So it's a really, really beautiful metaphor.
It's self-care, I mean, it's literally got self-care in there, taking care of yourself. What was the book title and who was it by?
So it's called The Discomfort Zone, and it's by Farah Storr.
Oh, wow, fantastic. So I'll share that as well on the social media, because I think that's really interesting for people to read as well. So we're coming to an end. Thanks, Dipti Tait, for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our facts and look forward to the next episode. Obviously, we've had a laugh, so you can hear us chuckling very slightly. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can follow Ben on Twitter at GMHip and Jeni on the internet at...
on the web, Jeni. Jeni, spelled Jeni, Nelson.co.uk.
Perfect. And you can follow Dipti on actual Twitter. On...
At Hypnotherapy.
Do you see what she did there?
That's very clever.
And if you did enjoy the podcast or have any comments for us, you can follow us on Instagram at A Spoonful of Theory, on Twitter at A Spoonful _, or by using the hashtag A Spoonful. And don't forget to give us a review on iTunes too. Jeni?
Oh yeah, and you can also get in contact via our website, which is A Spoonful, spelt Full.
It is a spoonful.
A full spoon.
Yeah.
A spoonful.co.uk. So that's brilliant. Thanks very much, Dipti.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dipti. And
thank you.
Thank you for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next month.